Back from the CBB Central podcast. It is October the 4th. The FBI trial, the FBI investigation has led to a trial, college basketball kind of facing its own little trial. Here is program after program receiving allegations of paying players. Brian Bowen obviously at the center of that, and that's been a story we've been monitoring for over a year now, but it's certainly coming to fruition. We'll try to bring you a little bit more of a positive note today with just a good old conference preview. SEC is what we'll be talking about today, Brad. Right at the league, I'm really excited about talking about. So good to talk to you, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the SEC is probably the best league in college basketball this year. The ACC is going to be up there as well. But in terms of this whole FBI nonsense we have here, I still have to stay in a wait and see mode because so many times we were teased last year with the preliminary stuff where we thought Arizona, Oklahoma State, USC would all be ineligible for the postseason, and then we get in like February that Arizona's done, but nothing happens, and now we're back at it again. I just need to see something before I'm gonna really overreact or kind of worry too much about the upcoming season.
In case you missed it, the allegations today from Brian Bowen Sr. taking the stand, talking about the offers relayed to him by Christian Dawkins for his son, Tugs, Brian Bowen, to sign with different colleges, high school programs, AAU programs. This is from Dan Wetzel, one of the reporters covering the trial. Dawkins told Brian Bowen Sr. Arizona would pay him $50,000 via Joe Pasternak, now the head coach at UC Santa Barbara. Dawkins told him Oklahoma State would pay $150,000, $8,000 for a car, and some undisclosed amount to buy a house via assistant coach Lamont Evans, who was one of the coaches who was arrested in this whole situation. Texas would help Bowen Sr. with housing via assistant coach Mike Morrell, who is now the head coach at UNC Asheville. Creighton would pay, quote, like $100,000 and a good job, like a lucrative job, via assistant coach Preston Murphy. University of Oregon, Bowen Sr. did not recall discussing anything with Dawkins. Bowen said he was paid $25,000 for his son to play AAU ball one summer with the Michigan Mustangs. That came from Adidas people. Bowen also testified he was paid $5,000 to $8,000 to pay with Mean Streets of the Nike Chicago AAU program, and $2,000 a month to play at La Lumiere, the prep powerhouse in Northwest Indiana, for Coach Shane Heerman, who is now the assistant coach for DePaul. Bowen Sr. said Dawkins told him an original offer of $60,000 to $80,000 from Adidas to attend Louisville was increased to $100,000 because that's how much Billy Preston got to go to Kansas. A lot of stuff there to unpack, a lot of stuff that is just really hearsay until we get hard evidence in the form of a wiretap, in the form of a intercepted text, in the form of some sort of ledger. So, I mean, I agree, Brad. It is a bit of a wait and see mode, but one of the things I was really kind of grappling with today was if cheating is as widespread as it is, programs like Creighton and Oklahoma State paying players, and Arizona has the money, Texas was going to help out here, Oregon potentially involved. We've got, players, several players have been mentioned throughout this process. I mean, to me, it almost doesn't make a lot of sense to start, giving postseason bans out to Louisville and USC and Zona and et cetera, where I think we really more just need to change the system. I mean, I don't really know how it benefits college basketball to put 50 teams on probation because they all cheated, because everyone's cheating. I think part of it for me just kind of says, let's fix college basketball. And if that means getting rid of the one and done, let's get rid of the one and done. If that means letting players profit off their likeness, let's let them profit off their likeness, because this is the Wild West.
Yeah, because personally, I don't care if a team cheats. I don't care if a payer, if the NCAA gets reformed and players get paid. I don't have strong feelings on either of those subjects, which puts me in a vast minority, it seems, among all fans. But I just want there to be good, competitive, compelling basketball. And I think the postseason ban, like the widespread postseason ban that you just said that it benefits no one, and that's exactly right. And the people who it hurts the most would be us, the fans, who then would have like either a watered down NCAA tournament or just a watered down season in general with a lot less widespread interest in a sport that's already fighting with the NBA and football and college football and everything for interest. Needs all the eyeballs they can get. Most of that comes from the NCAA tournament, so there's no reason to kind of hinder or like hamper the enjoyment surrounding that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think my hesitation with like I don't want to see play like whether I want players to get paid or not has nothing to do with like I wouldn't watch it because it would like ruin the purity of the game, like some people say. Like to me, it's simply like will it ruin the balance of power in college basketball if you let players get paid? I don't know that answer. I think if you open up to just players profiting off their likeness, which is more challenging a case than I think a lot of people think, but it's something that I think could be done. If you do that, I think you're in a position where colleges can still compete at the mid-major level and still win NCAA tournament games. I don't think it ruins the NCAA tournament the way some people say. I could be wrong, but I think you have to do it because you can't continue in a system where shoe companies are basically power brokers sending kids every which way without any oversight from the NCAA. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. I at this point, if cheating is as widespread as this seems, which I mean, I would doubt that it isn't at this point. I just think we have to kind of pick things up and move on. I just don't trust the NCAA to do that.
All right, should we move on to the SEC, where I'm sure none of the teams are cheating to get players?
No cheating whatsoever in the SEC. You mean like classy guys like Bruce Pearl, Will Wade aren't dropping a bag anywhere? Coach Calipari?
All right, so who do we start with? Do we start with the first man that you mentioned, Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, I think what we can do is just do what we did last podcast, which is go through by the standings. We had a tie between Auburn and Tennessee at the top last season, so we'll start with Auburn since it's alphabetical. Auburn had a terrific season last year, 26-8, 13-5. Really came out of nowhere after losing D'Angelo Purifoy and Austin Wiley early before the season due to this whole FBI saga. Both those guys will be back. They lose Mustafa Heron to St. John's. But Bryce Brown's back. Jared Harper, that forms a really good backcourt. Chuma Okeke is a breakout star potentially. Anthony McLemore is really good. This team's deep. They're athletic. They're talented. What are your thoughts? I know you're very high on Auburn, so let's hear the Brad Cavallero pitch on why Auburn is the best. It might be the best team in the SEC.
All right, so my main kind of place of optimism here with Auburn is because I just think that they have the highest floor among these teams in the top tier. You know, there are maybe 7 or 8 teams that like everyone has in their top 10. Auburn being kind of on the fringe of that. But like when you look at this team, there's very few holes. I think the only weakness that you could even potentially bring up about Auburn is that they don't have like first round NBA talent, or just saying that like they're a talent level overall isn't, or like you prefer Kansas's talent level to Auburn's. Like that's the only knock that Auburn could even have from a detractor is that you just don't like their pieces, because the pieces that they have fit together really well. They kind of have everything that you would want in a team. I mean, they have a great experienced point guard in Jared Harper. They have a perimeter scorer in Bryce Brown, and they have another one with a little more size who should be able to play some small ball 4 in D'Angelo Purifoy as well as a 3. They have a potential breakout candidate in Chuma Okeke. They have a deep front court that has rebounding and shot blocking, 3-point shooting, experience, continuity from last year. There's just I don't see what you could even say that you don't like about this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable. I mean, I think I'll kind of start with my main concern, and that's this Auburn defense went from largely a train wreck. I'm not even going to go largely. They were a train wreck on defense in 2016-17 to not the best defense, but a pretty solid defense. I mean, they played at a high tempo, so they gave up some points. But this was a very solid defense last season. And I don't know that the pieces that they add in Wiley and Purifoy make this a better defense. I think it makes them worse. Playing a Macklemore, Murray, OKK front court of like a 3-man rotation, two on the floor at a time was super switchable, super athletic. Macklemore could protect the rim. And when Macklemore exited last season, this was a different team. They really missed his energy, his rim protection, etc. And I don't think you're going to see him in that role nearly as much if you're going to have a true center in Wiley playing the 5. I think there could be a bit of an addition by subtraction there, because I don't think you want to play Macklemore, who shot very limited from 3 last season. I'm trying to get the exact numbers for him up as we speak. He took a few threes and shot 39%, but he's not a floor spacer by any means. And I mean, I think there's concerns when you play him as at a 4 that you hurt the spacing and the offense of this team, where they were so versatile last year, where they were playing like Murray at the 4 who could handle it. They could even go small and play Heron at the 4. I want to see more like Purifoy at the 4 lineups with this team. If you're going to do that around Wiley, a big man, I think that can work as a 4 out, 1 in, but it loses perhaps the team's most valuable player from last season, Macklemore, off the floor.
Yeah, so, I mean, they undeniably fell off a cliff when Macklemore got injured. What do you have, like a broken ankle or something in like mid-February, like early February, I think. And that's kind of the main reason I see, not that Macklemore was injured, but that Auburn, fell off so much towards the end of last year. They were blown out by Clemson in the NCAA tournament second round. But, you mentioned that Macklemore on paper could be playing more 4, but if their best lineup is with Macklemore at the 5, I don't necessarily know why they wouldn't, play that, and not just, play a little, but like in a crunch time, like if that's their best lineup, I'm sure Bruce Pearl would sit Austin Wiley for a crunch time to have Macklemore in there at that kind of small ball 5 spot. I know that Wiley's going to get minutes, and I think Wiley's a lot better than most people realize. He was in the 5-on-5 scrimmage portion of the NBA Combine, and he absolutely looks like he belonged among all those late first, early second round picks. I think he's just as good as like a Udoka Azubuike or a Sagaba Konate, at least at the Combine. They were all pretty comparable. I mean, he's pretty mobile. He plays with great energy. He's an excellent rebounder. He's not a good free throw shooter, but he's certainly a valuable piece. And while he's not as switchable as Macklemore, I think that he does have some potential with his mobility.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. And once again, with these high-level teams, we're talking about outcomes that aren't as catastrophic. Where, like, if what I'm saying, like, comes true with Auburn, they might fall like 15th nationally, would be, like, where I'd have them with my concerns compared to, like, top 5. It's not a situation where we're talking about Auburn going to out of the NCAA tournament. I do think there was a certain level of, like, this is a team with a chip on its shoulder that outplayed what they were last season, because they just, flat out, like, Bruce Pearl had an us against world mentality with it. And, like, Bruce Pearl isn't an incredible tactician of a coach. He's a great recruiter and he's a great motivator. And do you lose some of that motivation? It's always a weird thing for me to, like, question a team's motivation. Like, will Auburn want to play basketball this year? Like, of course they'll want to play basketball, but will there be some element of they don't have that it factor that they did last year, that edge, because they're not, FBI versus Auburn against the world type thing?
So I have them right now number 2 nationally, but that's probably going to be moved down to number 4 or number 5 nationally. And that puts them, for me, second in the SEC. So where do you have Auburn?
I have Auburn 3rd in the SEC right now. I've been, like, kind of waffling between them and LSU, but I think right now I'll stick with them at 3rd and right in that 10 to 12 range nationally.
So we off to Tennessee?
That would bring us to the Volunteers. And another incredible season for Tennessee last season under Rick Barnes. 26 wins, some huge wins throughout the season. Lost early in the NCAA tournament to Loyola Chicago on a buzzer beater, but they got everybody back. Grant Williams is back, SEC Player of the Year type player. Admiral Schofield, so versatile, high-level shooter at 6'5" and a bruiser. And then all that whole backcourt with Lamonte Turner, Jordan Bowden, Jordan Bone, all back. So excitement should be at as high as Tennessee basketball has been in quite a long time.
Yeah, Tennessee's only loss from their rotation was James Daniel, who was a high-level scorer at Howard, who settled into like a reserve kind of spark plug, three-point shooter. He didn't play a whole lot, but everyone else is back. Probably a bigger role for guys like you mentioned in the backcourt, Bone, Bowden, Turner, kind of assuming those minutes. They also have a few guys who are pretty highly touted and have yet to kind of break through. The biggest example being Yves Pons, who had a lot of NBA draft buzz coming into the year, found himself out of the rotation for a vast majority of the year. Got some run in the NCAA tournament, though. He's like a big kind of combo forward, super athlete who has also shown some versatility at that spot. So if he can have a breakthrough sophomore year, that could elevate Tennessee even more as a team that has two all-SEC caliber players with Schofield and Williams and brings everyone back. It's also interesting that, a lot has been made about the Tennessee team having a lack of high-level recruits, and they weren't really seen as like a legitimate team coming into the year. They were projected by most to be an NIT team, and then kind of in that, I think it was a battle for Atlantis, where they played Purdue and Villanova in back-to-back games, and they split those games. They beat Purdue, lost to Villanova, but they were very impressive. I watched both those games. They really stood out as a team that was not just playing up to the competition, but was actually very good, and they proved that throughout the SEC.
Well, and there's running it back, and there's what Tennessee is doing. I mean, literally every piece, as you said, except for James Daniel is back, but also they really don't bring in anything of note. DJ Burns is a pretty good recruit, 6'9", 270-pound big man out of South Carolina. He might play, but this is going to be the exact same rotation. Maybe Pons finds his way into the rotation. He's super long and athletic, but while we also wanted to talk about how this team was really good last year. I mean, this was a legit top 10 team for much of last season. We also kind of have to mention the fact that where are they really going to get better? Does Grant Williams really take that much of a step forward? I can't really see a big step from Grant Williams. Schofield could improve, but I don't think it's a significant jump from him. The guards could all get a little better, which brings you kind of incrementally up from 10 to maybe 5 nationally. I don't when you say who are the national title contenders this year, do you think of Tennessee? Because I just don't, even though they're clearly a top 10 team in my book. It's kind of a weird element.
Yeah, I think that they are absolutely a national title contender. I think the reason why they're not brought up is the same reason why they were projected to be an NIT team last year, despite having so many guys play the year before and then come back. Guys like Grant Williams made a huge jump from his freshman to sophomore year. Schofield made a huge jump. Guys like Bone and Bowden and Turner all got a lot of playing time as freshmen, and then kind of took a next step as sophomores. The reason why they're not being considered is the same reason as last year, where these aren't high-level recruits. They're not flashy players. I mean, Grant Williams was the SEC Player of the Year, right? And that's hardly ever mentioned, just because he's not really a NBA prospect. But I think that they do have some guys coming off the bench. I mentioned Pons, but also Jalen Johnson, who's barely played thus far in his Tennessee career. He's a super athlete on the wing. Maybe he could see a little time. Guys like Derek Walker, like a big bruising big man who played in the rotation as a freshman last year. Maybe he can take a step as a sophomore. But I think that you're exactly right with any improvements are going to be incremental, because these Pons, Johnson, Walker, these guys, they don't have a lot of upside in terms of their role, where the starting lineup is exactly the same and is firmly entrenched there. a guy like Pons might only play 15 minutes a game, so his impact could be a little more limited.
So, yeah, I mean, we'll get into the rankings at the end, but I have Tennessee at number 2 in the SEC. I'm assuming you have them third.
Yes.
All right. Let's move on to Florida, as they were next in the standings last season. They went 21-13, 11-7 in the SEC. Top 20 recruiting class coming in. Andrew Nembhard, a top 25 player in the class, will probably get the keys at point guard right away. They also bring in Keontae Johnson and Noah Locke, a pair of top 100 recruits who will play at guard spots on the wing. They bring back Jalen Hudson, who really can score the ball, but they lose kind of their heart and soul in Chris Chiozza. Not only an outstanding offensive creator, but just a absolute pest defensively. A really fun player to watch. Kevon Allen comes back after a really disappointing junior season. We'll see if he can take a jump in the senior year back to what he was. Keith Stone, Kavarius Hayes up front. I was kind of off the Florida bandwagon for a while, but I've kind of fallen for Nembhard, and I really think I think this is a clear top 25 team.
Yeah, so do I. I have them 19th. I think that they should be in everyone's top 25. They are currently in the composite, I believe, at number 25, which I think is a little too low. I have them a 19th, as I mentioned, which comes out to 6th in the SEC, which just speaks to how strong that top portion of the conference is. But I totally agree. The kind of fate of this team is going to rely on Kevon Allen making that jump that people thought he was going to make last year, kind of reverting to form. And then Andrew Nembhard's play at the point guard position. He is a freshman, but he played well in the U18. I think he also got moved up to their national team as well. And he's a very good player that I think is being underrated despite a lot of people knowing who he is.
Nembhard's a guy because he's very experienced. Like he plays very veteran. Like he plays like a veteran. Like he's not a guy who's going to come into college and make a lot of freshman mistakes. He may not be the most explosive athlete in the world, but this is a guy. He's a very good passer. I think he can run a team right away, which is so big with a freshman point guard because we've talked time and time again. A lot of freshman point guards now, obviously, Nembhard is a 5-star, so it's a little bit different. But a lot of freshman point guards either struggle to pass the ball or they struggle to shoot the ball. It's just hard for them to put the whole thing together. And Nembhard showed at the FIBA event this summer, averaging 15.7 points per game, 8.8 assists. I mean, those are some pretty terrific stats. And he took care of the ball pretty well as well, with an over 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. So if he could shoot the ball, he shot 41% from 3 in the event. I mean, he's just a terrific talent. I think he's gonna be an outstanding player from day one in Gainesville.
Yeah, I think another player who's flown under the radar is Keith Stone. He starts for them at that 4, but he could see some time as a small ball 5, and with his ability to kind of rebound and space the floor with his perimeter jump shot, that could be a really dangerous lineup for Florida if they go maybe Nembhard, Allen, Hudson, and then at the 4 you can go maybe Keontae Johnson, who's a very good athlete at that wing position, or maybe a guy like Chase Johnson who missed most of last year with injury. I think a concussion, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then have Stone at the 5. And then they also have Kavarius Hayes, who's their presumed starter at the 5. He started the past couple of years, and he's a solid defensive big man and a rim protector.
It does feel like the one spot they're missing is that combo forward, that 3-4 athlete who could let them play smaller, big. I guess you can go small with either a Jalen Hudson or a Keontae Johnson at the 4, but basically just play 4 guards. But Stone can be that stretch 4 and maybe even a stretch 5 in a blitz lineup. But you wish they had that versatile athlete who's going to be much more switchable that they could play at the 4 against more athletic competition. I mean, it's a small thing, but it could be the difference. I still think it's a top 20 team. I'm going to have them probably 18 in my top 25.
And then where do you have them in the SEC?
I'm going to have them 5th. I think I'm going to put them over Mississippi State.
And then I have them 6th.
All right. So I'm assuming you have Mississippi State, but we will get to that at the end of the program. The next team we have to go to, we'll actually go to Arkansas next because of the alphabetical. We're just going to keep it alphabetical. They were one of 3 teams that went 10-8 and tied for 4th. in the SEC last season, but it is a completely new look Arkansas club. There's little that remains that looks even a semblance of what this team did last season. They lose Jalen Barford and Daryl Macon, who were there. That was the identity of this team, was two outstanding guards who could create for themselves and others. They bring back Daniel Gafford, who has a lot of lottery pick buzz, but they lose some seniors like Dustin Thomas, who is a rotation player, Trey Thompson. They lose Anton Beard, who was a creator in the backcourt. Darius Hall transferred out of the program. So this is definitely a rebuild type year. They have a good recruiting class coming in. It's a class that's kind of it's underrated because of how good the SEC's classes are. Like, this is a top 40 class nationally, but it's 8th in the SEC. They don't necessarily have that one guy who's going to come in and be an elite player right away. But they have a lot of nice long-term pieces. Keyshawn Embry, Reggie Chaney. I've heard some good things about Isaiah Joe, who's an in-state product. But they're so young. And they have 8 enrollees for this class, 7 freshmen and a JUCO player. They're going to rely also on Jalen Harris, who's a transfer from New Mexico. He's probably going to be their starting point guard. I mean, beyond Gafford, I just don't see the talent. I don't see Gafford as a guy, I don't see Gafford as a guy who's going to carry an offense in post-ups.
I agree 100%. I mean, just this Arkansas team last year was so reliant on Barford and Macon. And then they got that breakout year from Gafford. This year, I mean, the only other returners besides Gafford are Adriel Bailey, who started a little bit last year, but for the most part was kind of out of the rotation, or just on the fringe of the rotation. He's like a defensive big man. Gabriel Ozabahoyan, who was mostly out of the rotation for a vast majority of the year. Khalil Garland, who was out with an injury last year, and then Harris, who was sitting out. So they have, this is probably one of, if not the most inexperienced high major team out there. And in regards to Harris, I do like this move from high major teams to get guys who are like role players from kind of comparable programs, maybe like a little step down. I think that's an underutilized strategy, but that's a conversation for another day. But this is a great recruiting class. It's going to take 2 or 3 years to fully reap the rewards of it. But for this year, Arkansas is going to be very bad. I have them 13th in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because Mike Anderson, so much of what he does is that pressing defense, which actually struggled a fair amount last year. They kind of underrated that it just didn't work the way they wanted to. They were just so good on offense that it didn't matter. But I mean, yeah, I've got them 12th, and honestly, 13th or 14th really feels possible. I think I have them 12th just because I think Gafford plus a pressing system is enough to steal you some games. But I mean, it's just gonna be tough. I mean, you're relying on freshmen who haven't played college basketball to run a system that is not only incredibly taxing physically, but incredibly taxing mentally. I think there'll be a lot of mistakes. I think it's gonna be a rough year for the Razorbacks.
Who do you think's Arkansas's leading scorer for this year?
Oh man, I think it's Gafford. I feel like it has to be. I mean, he averaged 12 points in 23 minutes last year. He's gonna get a lot of touches. I think he definitely did him in scoring. I don't see a guard scoring more than 13, 15 points a game, which is I think where Gafford will be.
Yeah, I would say Gafford 1, then probably Keyshawn Embry number 2, and he wasn't even a top 100 recruit. He was right on the fringe there.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty bleak. Let's move on to Kentucky. Kentucky went 10-8 in the SEC last year, 26-11. Might be the best team in the country though this year with the players that they bring in. Finally, Kentucky has some roster continuity from year to year. I mean, that's kind of a weird thing to wish for because it means your players didn't wind up as good in the draft as they might have expected to. But PJ Washington comes back. They get back Quade Green, Nick Richards. So they get a couple pieces back, and then they bring in a really good freshman class as always. Manuel Quickly, Tyler Harrow, both in the backcourt. Ashton Higgins as well, with Keldon Johnson on the wing, EJ Montgomery up front. They had grad transfer Reed Travis. So this team can go legit 9-10 deep with a lot of talent. They're very versatile. Is this the number 1 team in the country?
I have them number 1. They were great in their trip to the Bahamas. They have probably 9 guys that are not only 5-star recruits, but are like kind of proven commodities even. I mean, Nick Richards took a lot of flack for last season. In the trip to the Bahamas, he was great on offense. He still wasn't great on the defensive end, especially with his closeouts. But to have a guy who the fan base was so down on, and he's a former 5-star recruit, and he's only a sophomore, and he's showing these flashes, that's very encouraging. A guy like PJ Washington would have been drafted. Quaddy Green almost averaged double figures as a freshman, and the fan base was down on him as well. He'll be a great scoring guard this year, moving more off the ball. And they have NBA prospects with Kelvin Johnson, maybe even Tyler Harrow. EJ Montgomery's an NBA prospect. I think point guard is really the only question, and to have 3 different 5-stars that you could use at point guard, and that's your only question mark. That's a little crazy.
Yeah, no, it's pretty scary. I mean, my biggest concern kind of going to that Bahamas trip was how's the spacing going to look? I was a little worried just about, PJ Washington, Reed Travis front courts. But I was pleasantly surprised. Washington looked really good on the perimeter. He looked like he could protect the rim on the weak side. Reed Travis looked a little better switching pick and rolls than I thought he would. So that was definitely a concern that was absolved a little bit. Nick Richards playing well also helps because he can be a rim protector at least a little while defensively. He was definitely improved on that trip, as you said. Point guard battle, I think I'd go with Quickly right now. I wasn't all that impressed with Ashton Hagans out in the Bahamas. And Quade honestly didn't impress me in the Bahamas either at the 1 or the 2. But I didn't watch every single game. So I mean, I might have missed something with Quade. I think he's like super useful in the role of like undersized combo who can get you a bucket off the bench. But I don't know that I want to spend a lot of time playing a 6'6" and then maybe Tyler Harrow at the 3 lineup. Like, that's a pretty small group, and that hurts you a little bit defensively. Obviously, once again, we're talking about outcomes that change you from 1 to 7 nationally instead of like 1. But I mean, they're going to be really good. They're my SEC pick.
Yeah, I think in regards to Hagans too, you could see like the potential, especially with the vision. He has great vision. I just thought he would be a little more kind of like physical and athletic, just kind of based on the kind of hype that kind of surround him. He's not like a weak point guard or like an unathletic point guard. He's probably above average in both strength and athleticism, but just how he was built coming in, I thought he was going to be a little more John Wall-ish than he actually is. But he is a very good passer. You can see that in the Bahamas trip. I still think that Quickly will start the year as a starting point guard, though.
Yeah, I liked Quickly a little bit more. I thought he was the one point guard who actually created his own shot, which I think is important. I know you have a lot of options, but I think it's important in this day and age in college basketball to have a guy when there's 7 on the shot clock who can operate a pick and roll or just go get a shot for himself, get to the rim. He didn't make all those plays, but I thought he was pretty good. I think it's good to have 2 point guards, though. I think it's somewhat similar to quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, I don't think you want 2 point guards who just kind of have to rotate through all the time. I think it confuses guys, especially as freshmen, trying to figure out what they are and where their role is on the team. I don't think you want point guards who are constantly avoiding trying to make the big mistake and get pulled from the game. So I think it'll be something that Coach Calipari has to kind of meander through as the season goes on. I don't think it's a major concern, but it's just one of those little things that I monitor as the season kind of progresses.
Yeah, playing 2 point guards at once is very good. Like, see Frank Mason, Devontae Graham. When you just play 2 different point guards in an equal amount of minutes and then you never play them together, that's a sign that you do not have an answer at point guard.
Exactly. Anything else on Kentucky before we move on to Missouri?
Nope.
All right, let's go on to the Tigers. 20-13 last year, 10-8, go to the NCAA tournament under Coach Quanzo Martin in his first year. I mean, before we get into this team, the amount of respect that goes to Quanzo Martin, who has gotten some flack over the years as like not a great game coach, for taking a roster that lost Michael Porter Jr. in, I think, game 1, right? Or it was either game 1 or game 2.
Game 1.
Game 1, yes, exactly. To do that and take this team to the NCAA tournament, ride a guy in Cassius Robertson who came in fairly unheralded as a grad transfer, ride Jordan Barnett. Jonte Porter really got better as the season went on, using some guys that were recruited by by his predecessor, Kim Anderson, and Jordan Geist and Kevin Puryear for some big minutes. I mean, he did a really nice job in a tough situation. That said, I've got some concerns with this club because their backcourt might be the worst in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean their whole wing rotation was completely upended. They have literally no depth. I mean they have guys there, but the four wings, Torrance Watson, Javon Pickett, Christian Guest, and KJ Santos. Santos has the most experience because he played that year at UIC, I believe. Watson's a borderline top 100 recruit, and then Pickett and Guest are both 3 stars. But that's, I mean, to have 3 freshmen and then a JUCO transfer, that's just not ideal for a team that wants to make the NCAA tournament, and for how good that their front court's going to be with Porter, Puryear, and Tillman, and then even to have a senior point guard like Geist. I mean, Geist isn't spectacular, but he's adequate there.
Honestly, adequate might be a little nice for Jordan Geist.
Right, but that whole perimeter rotation is going to let this team down. I have them missing the NCAA tournament, and I'm not a big Conzo Martin guy. I think his whole thing is to spend a couple years somewhere, and then when he leaves, he leaves the program in a lot worse shape than when he got there.
Yeah, that is kind of a concern. I think Mizzou is at least billed as different because it's home for him. We'll see if that kind of works out, but. I mean, it's fascinating because Jonte Porter is going to be outstanding, like all SEC good, first-round draft pick good. I think Jeremiah Tillman is going to be really good. I think you'll split some time where Jonte will get some time at the 4 next to Tillman. Jonte will get some time at the 5 when Tillman goes off the floor. You can also swap in Puryear. I think that's a nice little 3-man rotation at the 4 and 5 spots. But then just those wings, it's so tough, as you said. I mean, I've actually heard a lot of good things about KJ Santos for what it's worth. I mean, he was one of those guys who was often injured in high school but had like the high major buzz but was never healthy enough to earn it. And so went to UIC, played adequately for 1 year, was also kind of banged up there, and then left, didn't play in JUCO last year because he was just redshirting to save the year once he committed to Mizzou. He's kind of a mystery. If he's really good, it gives you a chance, but it's still like a Xavier Pinson, Jordan Geist point guard duo is probably the worst point guard situation in the league, other than maybe Arkansas. Like, that's really bad. And, I mean, Cassius Robertson did a lot for them as like a secondary creator and shooter, and Torrance Watson can't replace that. And KJ Santos is not a good shooter. At least his college stats don't suggest that he is. It's just I just can't see it yet. I mean, I'd love to say this team can get in. I was a long time in the Mizzou's going to get in, but the more I just look at the roster, the more I'm like, Jonte Porter can't single-handedly just deliver them to the big dance. I think he'll keep them close, but I think this is an NIT team.
And that's not even Jonte Porter's game. I mean, his whole game is to be kind of like a glue guy who affects the game in multiple ways. He's not someone that like usually takes over offensively. You know, maybe he'll show that side of him with more responsibility in year 2, but just more kind of evidence of the fact that this probably is a NIT team at best. I mean, Jeremiah Tillman was probably their second best player, you'd say. I think I saw this stat a few weeks ago from Mike Gribanov, the NBA draft guru, that Tillman averaged more fouls than defensive rebounds per game. He's someone who is very foul prone, which kind of defeats the purpose of this whole 3 big rotation where you can play 2 of them at once if one of them is always in foul trouble. And then I know that we probably shouldn't be looking this far ahead, but we have them in the NIT this year. Next year, do you think? I mean, there's so many moving parts, but I think that the answer is pretty clear. Do you think that a starting lineup for Missouri next year of Drew Smith, Torrance Watson, Mark Smith, KJ Santos, and Jeremiah Tillman, do you think that that's an NCAA tournament team?
I mean, it's impossible to say. I think the talent, that's like a pretty decent talent-wise rotation, especially if guys like Mark Smith can live up to their recruiting billing, guys like if Torrance Watson can be as good as advertised. They already have one commit in Mario McKinney for this class. They're close on another one. So, I mean, it's hard to say. I wouldn't bet on it either way at this point, but I kind of see where you're going with this, and like other than Michael Porter, is he really upping the talent level? Like he's upping the talent level to a point where like Mizzou isn't irrelevant like it was with Kim Anderson to the point where they're a laughing stock, but he's also not upping the talent level to SEC contender in a league where there's so many good coaches who are recruiting so well. I think in other leagues he'd be a lot better off by landing one top 100 kid a year and then like a couple 3-stars and like kind of hang around. Like that just doesn't work in the SEC right now with the coaches they have.
Yeah, I just see this trending downwards, especially you mentioned with how the other SEC teams are recruiting. So it's not even good enough to recruit good enough. You need to recruit better than the competition in your league. I mean, we see this with DePaul in the Big East, where DePaul's getting better, but it doesn't matter because everyone else is getting better too. So they just can't catch up. So DePaul is going to be significantly better this year than they were last year, but they're still probably going to be the last or ninth in the Big East. With the Missouri, they're getting good players in via transfer or recruiting, but even the people at the bottom, teams like Georgia, they're getting recruits. Arkansas got all the recruits this year. That's going to just build, and that whole core is going to be really formidable in a couple of years. And it looks like Missouri could be left behind in another kind of program where Quanzo Martin kind of goes from NCAA tournament in year one, then NIT, and then cupboards bare all of a sudden.
What's kind of scary, if you're like Arkansas, just kind of like thinking back, is this recruiting class is everything for them. I mean, 8 spots filled on one class. If they don't live up to it, and there's not a top 150 recruit in this mix. I mean, in a league where, obviously you're going to press, so you need guys who fit the system, but that's got to be panicking for Mike Anderson because this is all he's got, and he's got to recruit against Will Wade every year. He's going to bring in 3 5-stars.
Well, like Arkansas has, Chaney, Henderson, and Embry. I think we're all in that 100 to 125 range.
They fell off the composite late, so none of them were technically 150 composite recruits. But like at the time, yes, they were pretty good recruits.
But 3 150 recruits, and then you look at Will Wade, where it's like, we're going to bring in Emmett Williams, Naz Reid, wings, point guard, sign them up, great JUCOs. And then you're sitting there with your 3 150 recruits.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. It's definitely something we're gonna have to watch develop over the next couple of years. Vandy's doing recruiting extremely well. I'll get to Vandy in a bit, but let's get into Mississippi State, another team that is recruiting extremely well. Top 20 class this year, headlined by Reggie Perry, a fringe 5-star, formerly committed to Arkansas in that jewel class, but then left because he wanted to be closer to home, even though Starkville is just as far as Fayetteville from his hometown in Thomasville, Georgia. They also signed number 63 recruit Robert Woodard, who's a 6'6" wing combo forward type. DJ Stewart, a 6'6" kid who can score the ball, in-state product. They've done a good job with those in-state kids. And then a JUCO player in Jethro Tshumpa, who is I believe, transfer from Arizona State originally. They also add a sit-out transfer in Prince Oduro from Siena, and kind of round out the rotation from there. But this is a team that's kind of a classic example of running it back plus adding 1 or 2 kind of high-level pieces. And we're trying to make this massive jump from NIT to top 25.
Yeah, and I think, based on their performance toward the end of the season and in the NIT, I think that this is a team that's really finding its stride. They have really high-level talent where Quindary Witherspoon is an upper echelon college player. Maybe he's not an NBA player, but Lamar Peters has gotten some NBA buzz. He kind of had a disappointing year compared to the expectations from his play at, I think, Nike Skills Camp. But Eric Holman is an NBA prospect. They got great play out of Abdul Adu, the center, as a freshman, and Nick Witherspoon as a freshman. So they got those guys becoming sophomores. Their top 6 is all back with Peters and Tyson Carter as well. And then you add a 5-star recruit or like a very high 4-star recruit in Reggie Perry, who can provide a nice 3-man front court rotation similar to Missouri with Holman, Perry, and Adu. And then 2 other top 100 recruits. I've seen a lot of positive remarks about Robert Woodard too. This is a team that should be 8 or 9 deep with a lot of talent, bringing it all back. I see no reason why this isn't a top 15 team.
I think the one thing we do kind of have to just kind of keep tabs on is the shooting. And it doesn't really get better by playing Reggie Perry more minutes because, I mean, I think he'll swap in a lot for Adu, but he'll also, Eric Holman will take some time off, and he's perhaps the best shooter on this team. This team shot 31.9% from three last year. That's 323rd nationally. They were 13th in the SEC in conference play, shooting just an even 30%. This kind of a contrast to shooting 54% from two, which is the SEC's best mark. So how do we kind of live with that? I mean, how do you kind of balance that? I mean, they were an average rebounding team. They didn't really win on the turnover margin. They didn't play elite defense. They were just solid on that end of the floor. Dude, they play kind of slow. Like, nothing to me about last year's team was special, and I don't know what it felt like a kind of run-of-the-mill bunch. How do you take that next step that big? I mean, Lamar Peters keeps getting hyped at these summer events. He was hyped up again, I think, at CP3 this summer, but we had to see it on the floor in games. And I mean, Perry helps, but he might hurt some spacing that's just already not good. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a concern for me.
I think one area where they really stand out is that they have three guards that can all really create, who are all able to put the ball on the floor and attack. I mean, both Weatherspoons and Peters. That's a really unique look, and a look that's very difficult to guard, having those three guys that are capable of creating. And then, I mean, Eric Holman, in terms of percentages, was really their only floor spacer last year. But I think that Tyson Carter could, he's going to be a junior, I believe. He could take a step forward because, I mean, as these guys get older, especially ones that are known as shooters, their shooting percentages start to more closely replicate their reputation, where guys who are known as shooters could usually struggle with their shot as freshmen. And then, I mean, if a Quindary Witherspoon can rein in the shot selection, which I'm not sure will happen, he's often a little too wild, but he's someone who's also capable of knocking down outside shots.
Yeah, I mean, I still think they're probably a top 25 team. I just don't know about the top 15 buzz. I think I'm going to have them behind Florida. I have them sixth right now in the SEC. Still an NCAA tournament team. Still possibly a top 6 seed. But I just think there's a little bit of concern there for me that we just kind of have to kind of work through. Anything else on the on this Mississippi State Bulldog club?
Just that I have them 4th in the SEC and 13th nationally.
Moving on to Texas A&M, had that big NCAA tournament win over North Carolina, but this roster is fully gutted from that. They lose Tyler Davis, they lose Robert Williams, they lose Tony Troca Morelos, so they lose their entire core of big men, which is definitely a big deal. Just kind of navigating a team that really won off their size last season. How do you do that now? With guys having to step into much bigger roles than they were as they return to this team. They don't bring in any like blue chip type players in terms of recruits. This is one of the worst classes by like recruiting ranking in the SEC. Another program that kind of feels in danger of being left behind with the amount of just talent coming into the league when you have kind of a mediocre class like they did this year. They have a couple signees for this upcoming class 19, which is a very big class for them. They'll still have Admin Gilder, but they lost DJ Hogue early to the pros. They're going to rely a lot on a pair of transfers up front and Josh Nebo from St. Francis, Pennsylvania, who will be kind of an interesting test as an NEC import. And then Christian Mekawulu, who was solid at Tennessee State. But at the same time, those guys just feel like league average big men to me. You're going to look at guys like Savion Flagg, TJ Starks, Admin Gilder are going to have to carry this team. I just don't think that's a recipe for success in any way.
So they do add Wendell Mitchell, who I think is a top JUCO player. He used to play at Baylor. He was kind of a fringe rotation guy, but he's known as a scorer. I think he could step in and really give them another scoring option in the backcourt with Gilder and Starks. But Starks and Gilder were the 2 starting guards last year after Dwayne Wilson went down with an injury. But Gilder is I guess he's a shooter more than a scorer. Starks is a scorer, and he's a pretty ball dominant player who could make some real head scratching decisions at times. And I like Savion Flag as a big breakout candidate at that power forward spot. But I think the big weakness of this team is depth, because I think a starting lineup of Starks, Gilder, Mitchell, Flag, and Mekawulu with Nebo and Chandler off the bench. I mean, that's an okay 7, but I think you want a few more guys off the bench that are kind of known commodities, or a little more pop in that starting lineup. I think that they're kind of stuck in an odd place here. I have them. See where I have them in the SEC. I have them at number 11 in the SEC.
Yes, and just kind of note on Wendell Mitchell. I mean, he was terrific last season in junior college. I just wanted to pull up those stats for us because I know you mentioned how good a recruit he was. He averaged about 20 points a game in junior college, also 6 rebounds and 6.5 assists. He had a pretty solid assist-to-turnover ratio of 2.1 to 1. Shot 37% from 3. So he's the real deal by all accounts. I just don't know that backcourt's enough to carry a team. It just feels they feel like they have 7 good rotation players to starter to rotation player level players, but just no high level player. And in this league, with the amount of talent there is, I think you need 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think that's it for Texas A&M. This is kind of a weird team. They're not very exciting. They don't pop a lot. I think that they'll be okay nationally. I have them 84th nationally, which puts them on an NIT bubble, not including the NIT auto bids. So it probably puts them out of the postseason. But there's not a whole lot to say here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 13th because I'm going to trust the press at Arkansas to do a little bit plus Gafford, but definitely not a weird take to have them where you have them. Alabama, next team we're going to do. Alabama was kind of a team in flux coming into the season, losing Colin Sexton, but they really recovered late with this signing class, getting Kyra Lewis, an in-state product who reclassified up. He's going to be a 17-year-old playing college basketball, won't be actually draft eligible to go one and done. But he's probably going to start or at least be a 6th man for this team. They bring back John Petty, who was up and down as a freshman, Dante Hall, who's a good big man, Dazon Ingram, who's kind of had a weird tenure at Alabama, but a pretty solid guard who can create a little bit, rebound, be tough. They lost Braxton Key. Herb Jones is a guy who has a lot of people excited just because of his switchability, but he has to show me something on offense. There's some interesting lineups you can play, matching up, say, with Kira Lewis, John Petty, Dazon Ingram, 1, 2, 3, Herb Jones at the 4, Dante Hall at the 5. I mean, that's scary. I like that a lot.
I think that the starting lineup of Ingram, Petty, Jones, Mack, and Hall, I think that's a crazy lineup in terms of size, like positional size, length. There's even some, I'd say, adequate shooting for a lineup of that kind of length and athleticism with Petty and Mack. Ingram is capable. I think and then bringing guys like Keir Lewis and Riley Norris off the bench. I think that's a pretty unique lineup with all that length and athleticism. And unlike Texas A&M, this is a team that is super interesting. I really want to watch them play. Really want to get a feel of how these pieces fit together without Colin Sexton.
Do you think Dazon Ingram can be your point guard?
He was not last year, obviously, because they had Sexton, but he was the year before.
And the year before did not go all that well?
Well, I mean, that was, they were playing 2 bigs, right? They had Bola Olaniyan playing with was it Hall? But they were playing 2 bigs together.
They had Hall playing some. They'd thrown like Jimmy Taylor.
Yeah, that was it, Jimmy Taylor.
Yeah,
but they had no floor spacing. They were like an excellent rebounding and defensive team, but I mean there was no spacing. There was no really attempt at offense.
Right. I guess the question is how much do you blame Ingram for that, and how much do you just blame the talent around him? I think the truth's probably somewhere in the middle. I think I would probably lean towards starting Lewis and maybe bringing Petty as a 6th man off the bench. Once you have Tevin Mack in there, I completely just kind of lost my mind for a second and forgotten Tevin Mack was a person, but he really increases the upside of the team. I think people kind of forget that Tevin Mack was a legit stud at Texas. I mean, he averaged, pull up the stats here. Tevin Mack averaged in his sophomore season in the 15 games he played before being dismissed, 15 points, 5 rebounds, shot 39% from 3 on 6 attempts a game. I mean, that is a dangerous 6'6" athlete who can play like 2 through 4. And that's an exciting player. Riley Norris, as you said, is like a low-key big returner. I mean, he missed much of last season, but he can really shoot the ball. He's a leader. I like this Crimson Tide team a lot, I know. We're definitely going to have to see what they do. And I guess my final question for you, Brad, what do you see from Herb Jones this year? I mean, there's been a lot of hype around him. I know he's a great athlete. I know he can really impact the game defensively. Do you see that offensive improvement coming?
I'm kind of torn on this. I don't know if I've seen enough of Herb Jones to make this comparison, but I'm going to make it anyway. I think he could be a little Pat McCaw-esque. You know, he can play a little point guard, but he's more of a wing. He's thin, but he's very long and athletic. And he's kind of intriguing because of those kind of flashes of being like a creator. I don't think he'll average double figures, but I still think that he's a legitimate NBA prospect. But I mean, between Ingram, Petty, Mack, I think all those guys score in double figures, and then you'll get points from Lewis, Norris, maybe even Alex Reese, and then Hall and Giddens will get their 5 or 6 there. So I don't know if there's enough points to go around for Jones to average double figures. I think he could average like 8 or 9 points a game.
Yeah, I think that's probably right where I would slot him in. Bama, I have right now 7th in the SEC. I think they're I'm pretty confident in them being an NCAA tournament team, but we'll kind of see. What about you?
I have them 7th, and I have them 37th nationally, which I think is a little low. I think I need to move them up a little bit, but it's hard in that range. There's so many teams that I like in that kind of. I think the range is really like 20 to 41 or 42. I think it's a really big range in that what for me is like your 3rd or 4th tier of teams.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a lot of just kind of uncertainty with a lot of those clubs, which is pretty normal for college basketball. I think this year especially, it's a little bit it's just a little unclear. Let's move on to the LSU Tigers. This is a team that we talk about the recruiting that the SEC's done. We've mentioned Will Wade a few times. I mean, they bring in 2 5-stars and 2 4-stars and 2 3-stars in a 7-man recruiting class. Excuse me. They have Naz Reid is the number 1 recruit in this class, 18th nationally, like a point forward, really talented kid out of Roselle Catholic in New Jersey. Emmett Williams, super athletic combo forward who was a stud in the McDonald's All-American game. Javonte Smart pairs perfectly with Tremont Waters, who might be the SEC Player of the Year in the backcourt. And then Darius Days, number 62, who would be a blue chip recruit in any other class, is like a forgotten man who might not play. Marlon Taylor was excellent in junior college last year, 6'6", really athletic, can really shoot the ball. Daniel Kingsby was a former Pitt signee. He's a very good shooter at 6'1", kind of a combo guard. And then Cortez Cooper, another kind of late bloomer JUCO prospect. But this LSU team, man, they're going to be something else to watch with Tremont Waters and all those guys. What's the limit? What's the ceiling for this team?
I mean, the ceiling is like number 1. I mean, they have a top level point guard. They have experienced guys on the wing who've played in Skylar Mays and Darrell Edwards. They have these great JUCO recruits with Taylor and Kingsby. They have NBA prospects in the front court. I mean, Naz Reid is the headline there, but Emmett Williams, also a 5-star recruit. Kavell Bigby Williams was a former top-rated JUCO player as like a rim protector. This team checks really all the boxes. I guess you could ask for like a wing creator, but maybe like Smart or Taylor could kind of step into that role. But the ceiling is as high as number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I would pretty much agree. I mean, Tremont Waters last year was just outstanding. 16 points, 6 assists, 3.5 rebounds, made big shot after big shot, just kind of carrying this team to an above 500 finish, which was, I think, a surprise for a lot of people under Will Wade in year 1. They did lose Brandon Rashal, who I thought was going to be a nice piece for them, but it's not really surprising. He was just going to have a tough time fitting in. I think there's always concerns with these massive recruiting classes, especially with coaches who haven't really dealt with it yet. How do you manage the minutes? How do you manage the expectations of these guys? I think it can all work out okay, but it's just one of those things you always do worry about. It's hard to even really look at last year's stats because with the exception of Waters, Skylar Mays, and Edwards, it feels tough to even project guys getting a lot of rotation minutes. I mean, Brandon Sampson might play a little bit. I mean, it's literally just all on the newcomers. I'm really high on Marlon Taylor. I think that's why I'm a little higher on LSU, which is why I'm pushing to put them up over Auburn. I've literally watched like 4 minutes of Marlon Taylor highlights in my life, so it's not like I've like went down a film hole of like Panola Junior College basketball. But I mean, his stats in JUCO, given he has a 40+ inch vertical, that he averaged I think 17 and 10 while shooting 40% from three, which is exactly what he did. 44% from three while averaging 17 and 10, and has a 40+ inch vertical. Like, whoa.
Well, Sampson's gone, but
you're right.
They have plenty of guys. I mean, you just went through Taylor there, and then all these like either experienced guys, whether they be JUCO or returners, and then highly rated freshmen. This team's just loaded with talent. I do wonder how the death of Wade Sims kind of plays a factor here. Like, I don't think that they would necessarily play worse, but it definitely should have an impact, right? You think?
I mean, it's kind of a hard impact to measure, but yeah, I mean, whenever you're dealing with something as serious as a death, and Wade Sims, for those who missed it, was killed in gunfire near Southern University last week. Just kind of a senseless death. You really just it's such a tragedy to see a young player lose his life like that. But at the same time, I mean, does it invigorate this team? Maybe. Does it cause them to kind of never be focused? Maybe. This is a young team. I don't really know how to evaluate what it's going to do to this team, but I do think it will have an impact. I just don't know how much.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, from a basketball perspective, Sims wasn't going to play that much. Maybe he was in the rotation, maybe not. He was in the fringe, but in terms of just like the impact on the locker room, I think that's something that's worth monitoring. You are right that we have no idea how to measure it, and I'm sure it's different for different teams and in different locker rooms, different relationships amongst the players. But I guess that's it for LSU. I have them 5th in the SEC and 14th nationally.
So you have Mississippi State ahead of LSU
by 1 spot. Yep.
Interesting.
1 spot nationally and in the SEC. Yeah.
Let's move on to Georgia. We have 4 teams left: Georgia, South Carolina, Vandy, and Ole Miss. I think Vandy's the only one that warrants incredibly deep conversation, so we'll try to go somewhat quickly through these Final Four, but we want to give them their due. Georgia, year one under Tom Crean, the talent level is just pretty low. Deontay Mayton's gone. He was the one like high-level piece. Rayshawn Hammonds has a lot of potential, was a top 50 recruit, and Tyree Crump also could kind of take a little bit of a step forward. Nick Claxton, Speedy, as he's known, has some potential. But to me, there's just not like anything close to an all-SEC player on this roster, save some significant improvement from a guy like Hammonds. And Tom Crean isn't a guy who maximizes the talent he's got to work with. He's not a grinder who just finds a way. He's a guy who out-recruits his opposition. So I think, to me, it's going to be a tough year for Georgia. I think I'm going to pencil them in last right now.
I have them in 12th. I do like Hammonds and Claxton. I think that's a good future 3-4, or maybe even down the road 4-5 for Georgia. But I mean, outside of that, I mean, they have a lot of guys. I mean, maybe some of them can break through. I know I've seen a lot of positive things about Ignis Sarge Eunice, combo guard there. Amanzi Ngumzi was a top 100 recruit at that 4 or 5 spot. Ogbidi is going to be a senior. I mean, he's played a lot of minutes in his career. He's not an offensive player. I mean, they have a lot of guys, but kind of they're like a worse version of Texas A&M, where they have some nice guys, but it's just not enough talent, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see some of these individual parts work. And I'm excited to see what Tom Cretin can do with this program. I think he's going to do a nice job. I think he's done a pretty good job recruiting the state of Georgia, which has been was a concern from a lot of kind of talking heads coming in to him. Was how would he recruit such an interesting state in the basketball landscape? He's done a pretty good job so far. I think he'll do a good job with this program. I just think he needs a couple more players to go around. I don't really buy the Tayshaun Hightower as your starting point guard thing. Like, I just don't think he's that good. But we'll see what happens.
What about Turtle Jackson?
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
I mean, I think he's literally going to be the starting point guard. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that is bad or just kind of like a blah point guard, but it's certainly not good.
I would say it's not good. I will say that. Let's move on to South Carolina before we get ourselves in trouble talking about this roster. South Carolina brings I think South Carolina is like a low-key, pretty intriguing team this year. Chris Silva's back for one more year, 14-8 guy. Mike Kotsar was an 8-5 guy. Justin Minaya has a lot of potential. Hassani Gravett is solid. He does a job at point guard. They also have bring in some interesting pieces in the backcourt. That's the real concern. Do they have enough in the backcourt to win SEC games? They bring in 4 3-stars and a 4-star recruit. AJ Lawson was the late headliner, getting him top 150 recruit out of Canada. 6'6" wing, needs to put on weight. They also have TJ Moss and Jermaine Cuisnard, who seem like guys who could somewhat fit into a rotation. And a sneaky guy, Alonzo Frink, who a lot of people liked at FIBA this summer. One of the U18 events, I believe. He could be a sneaky piece, even though he's 433 in the composite.
Yeah, I really liked Frank when I watched him. He was a little wild based on his role on his U18's national team, but he's a big-bodied forward who can play inside and out. He can shoot a little bit. He can handle the ball a little bit. I think he's a very interesting piece who should be in the rotation. This is an excellent front court. You mentioned Kotsar and Silva. Now this is their 3rd straight year being starting 4 and 5. So that's some great continuity and great experience there. And they have a guy, Felipe Haas, who is I guess the backup center. He'll also play there in the front court, and that 4-man front court is very strong. Point guard play is definitely a concern. Gravett and Trey Campbell from Georgetown, they are very much not creators. Like they're just kind of steady, kind of backup point guard caliber. But that's what they have at point guard. Then they're going to need a lot from AJ Lawson, like from the jump to be a NCAA tournament team. I think that it's realistic for them to hope to be an NCAA tournament team. I think that they'll fall short and be an NIT team based on this perimeter talent.
Yeah, generally I'll not bet on a team to make the NCAA tournament if their biggest weakness is backcourt, especially point guard, which is kind of where they're at. So I think I'll be kind of conservative and say no. Right now I have them number 9 in the SEC, above Mizzou. So I think they're pretty close. I mean, I think a Lawson Minaya wing is pretty good. I think a Silva Kotsar front court is very good. I just don't know about the point guard play. I don't love the depth. Yeah, I don't really know much more to say. I mean, with South Carolina team, it's like if they can get league average point guard play, they'll probably make the NCAA tournament. But getting league average point guard play in this league from Trey Campbell and Hassani Gravett probably isn't going to work out.
Yeah, I have them 81st nationally, 10th in the SEC, which is NIT bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, offense will always be a concern with this group. Defense will not.
Fair enough. Let's move on to Mississippi. The Ole Miss Rebels get a new coach after a long-term era of Andy Kennedy, who did a pretty good job with that program. It's new coach Kermit Davis. a guy who did a great job at Middle Tennessee State and did a solid job of accumulating some late talent in the on the recruiting trail. Got a couple guys who could play some minutes right away in Blake Hinson, Fringe top 150 recruit out of Sunrise Christian in Kansas, kind of a combo forward. Versatile wing Luis Rodriguez out of Woodstock Academy, and then KJ Buffin, who follows from Middle Tennessee State, as well as Carlos Curry, and then a JUCO player in Brian Halams who could play a little bit. They bring back guys like Devontae Schuler. They bring back Terrence Davis, who's a high-level player, Brian Tyree. So there's some pieces left in the cover. Bruce Stevens is a pretty good big man for Kermit Davis, and Kermit Davis is a guy who's going to win on coaching, not on recruiting. I wouldn't be surprised if this team makes – I feel like they'll be similar to LSU last year where they're good enough to be interesting but not good enough to really make a push towards an NCAA tournament bid.
Yeah, I could see them being 6-12 or, in that range. I was burned by Ole Miss last year. I loved their talent. They did have a ton of talent with Markel Crawford and DeAndre Burnett, along with Davis and Tyree and Schuler. And Stevens lived up to the hype at power forward. Dominic Olejniczak did not live up to the hype at center. He was very disappointing based on all the kind of hype in preseason reports that we got on him. So I had Ole Miss 6th last year and making the NCAA tournament. Everything fell apart despite being so talented. They still have Terrence Davis, but I have them finishing last.
Yeah, I mean, I have them at 11 actually right now, ahead of Arkansas, A&M, and Georgia. I think that's kind of clearly the bottom 4 teams, though. I think it'd be a pretty hot take to have any of those above the top 10. I think if you were to separate the SEC, it's Tier 1, Kentucky, Tennessee, maybe LSU and Auburn. I think it's kind of debatable. Tier 2, Florida, Mississippi State. Let's just throw LSU and Auburn in that first tier. Florida, Mississippi State, Bama, and then Vandy and South Carolina and Mizzou is a tier, and then Ole Miss, Arkansas, A&M, Georgia is a tier.
That's fair. I would, obviously move around. I would probably move. I think I'd go Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn in tier 1, then LSU, Mississippi State, Florida in tier 2, Alabama by itself in tier 3, and then 4. I think I'd go Missouri, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, and then I'd also throw Texas A&M in there, and then that clear bottom 3 for me with Ole Miss, Georgia, and Arkansas.
Let's wrap up the team previews with Vanderbilt. We did a deep dive on them, so I don't know how necessary it is to go super, super deep here. 2 elite recruits in Simi Shitu and Darius Garland. Also bring in Aaron Neesmith, who is pretty talented as a top 100 recruit. They bring back Saban Lee in the backcourt, who is pretty good as a freshman. Joe Toy is kind of a glue guy. We thought this was an NCAA tournament team, probably, but kind of on the bubble.
Yeah, I had them as one of my last teams out of the field. I like the backcourt, although it's probably going to get overrated a little bit because of Garland's pro prospects versus impact as a freshman point guard. And I like the transfers that they bring in, being Matt Ryan and Yanni Wetzel. I think both of them probably start and provide some much needed shooting to this lineup. I just think that they are a little short in the depth department and a little short in kind of the complementary pieces next to their big 3 of Garland, Lee, and Shitu.
Yeah, their depth is a bit of a concern. The depth, to me, this was a team that I kind of highlighted before transfer season really heated up and said this would be a perfect grad transfer team, a grad transfer combo forward who could give them some spacing and experience. I think would have been a perfect fit. I guess Matt Ryan provides some of that, but just some depth. They could have used one dude who could just play good rotation minutes in the SEC. Because this team isn't very deep. I think Clavon Brown could step up a little bit. Max Evans, there's some pieces here. I think it's an NCAA tournament team. I'm just not necessarily sold on it being a top 25 team the way I think Vanderbilt fans will think they are.
Yeah, I think it was the top 25 I did right before the NCAA championship, the day before I put out top 25. And I had two people say, no, Vanderbilt, they have 3 5-star recruits. That's why you don't count your chickens before you hatch, because Romeo Langford is not on Vanderbilt. But their fans were very confident that they were going to get him. And then in regards to that need of that combo forward type, I've seen. I mean, we mentioned that with Florida too. A lot of teams need that player, and I also saw that when we were doing our NBA draft stuff in the early portion of the summer. You could go through the second round and say, well, what does this team need? This team could use that athletic combo forward who can space the floor a little bit. So I think that's such a coveted position, and there's just not enough of those guys to go around. Where hopefully, I mean, there's a course correction, and that kind of archetype becomes more valuable, maybe in terms of up transfers or grad transfers or what have you.
You mean PJ Washingtons don't grow on trees?
Apparently not, or like Jeremy Grant's.
Yeah, no, that's actually a perfect example because like a glue guy, like elite glue guy, like does a lot of different things. Let's run through our standings through the league. I know we've really just touched on them. I'm just going to give you mine. I went Kentucky 1, Tennessee 2, LSU 3, Auburn 4, actually Auburn 3, LSU 4, excuse me. Florida 5, Mississippi State 6, Bama at 7, Vandy at 8, South Carolina 9, Mizzou 10, Ole Miss 11, Arkansas 12, A&M 13, and Georgia at 14.
Then I have Kentucky at 1, Auburn 2, Tennessee 3, Mississippi State 4, LSU 5, Florida 6, Alabama 7, Vanderbilt 8, Missouri 9, South Carolina 10, Texas A&M 11, Georgia 12, Arkansas 13, and Ole Miss in last.
Awesome. Do we want to give a player of the year in the conference and then our first team, if you will?
Sure. So I can start with that. Player of the year, I went with. I think it's going to be one of the popular picks, but not the most popular pick, and that being Tremont Waters. I think if LSU makes this jump, I think having one of the best players in college basketball and him being a point guard, I think that is certainly worthy of player of the year.
Yeah, I have Waters as well. I think a lot of people will jump onto a Kentucky player like PJ Washington will get a lot of hype. I think they'll kind of steal votes from each other, if you will. A lot of really good players, maybe not one elite one. And so Tremont, he might lose some point per game production, but he could be a 7 or 8 assist game guy, and that's an exciting player to watch. I think he'll get the crown.
Yeah, it's also interesting because Grant Williams won it last year, and he would not be winning it this year if Waters wins, obviously. But in terms of my first team, I saw 4 really clear options for me, and that was Waters, Quindary Weatherspoon, Grant Williams, and PJ Washington. For the 5th spot, I don't have an Auburn player on there, which if I had done it as a top 5 team could end up being wrong. But I went with Jonte Porter because I think Missouri is going to be better than Arkansas, and Porter is not that much worse of a player and prospect. Or, I mean, he could be better than Gafford in both those areas as well.
And we are pretty boring people because I have the exact same 5.
All right. So who do you have second team?
Ooh. Bryce Brown or Jared Harper, maybe both. I would have probably – I'm going to go Tyler Harrow. I think he's going to score a bunch of points. This is difficult. Jalen Hudson and Darius Garland and Emmett Williams. Is that 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
So mine is very different.
Around, but it's fun.
So here we go. So mine is very different. I went Jalen Hudson, Austin Wiley, Jared Harper, Daniel Gafford, Admiral Schofield.
I thought about Schofield. I wanted to kind of go young, but I thought there were some exciting players in there. But you kind of put me on the spot. So if I took more time, I might have changed my opinion. I don't mind.
No Chris Silva for either of us. No Kayvon Allen.
Terrence Davis is an interesting guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. This league is so talented. And just everybody's back.
Cool.
Anything else you want to touch on? I guess we could say real quick, do we think the SEC is the best conference in college basketball this season?
I'll say yes. I think that they get 7 bids, but I think Vanderbilt and Missouri are close enough to that cut line where the SEC can still be considered the best conference even if they don't have the most bids.
I will say yes and 8 bids. So that should just about wrap us up. We will bring you another conference preview, hopefully either this weekend or early next week, because we got to get through, I believe, 8 previews. We're trying to obviously balance all this FBI stuff, and if there's something big that occurs, we'll probably bring you some sort of emergency podcast. Like if for whatever reason, Sean Miller were fired tomorrow, I'm sure we could find some time to record some takes, right, Brad?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated on that. Keep following us on Twitter. Keep following my preview series so far. It's been a good 4 days. ASUN preview was today. I didn't get enough hate from Florida Gulf Coast fans that I would have liked. So people should come into my timeline and get mad at me. Tomorrow's my A10 preview. I have a ton of A10 followers. Good thing I have very little class tomorrow because I'm going to be dealing with a lot of complaints. Thanks, guys, and everybody. Hope you have a great night.